Donald Trump becomes the first former president in US history to be found guilty of a felony crime.
Ukraine welcomed 75 people home from Russia in the war's latest prisoner swap.
Many people with disabilities won't be able to cast their votes in the upcoming EU elections.
Former US President Donald Trump has been found guilty of all 34 counts of falsifying business records in a hush-money scheme to influence the result of the 2016 election. He's the first ever former president to be found guilty of felony crimes in America's history. He was accused of concealing a payment made by his lawyer to former adult film star Stormy Daniels to buy her silence ahead of the presidential election. Speaking outside the court after the verdicts had been read, Trump blasted the trial as a disgrace.
We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent.
But the Manhattan District Attorney said the only voice that matters is the voice of the jury.
While this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor.
Just minutes after Trump was convicted, the Biden campaign released a statement saying no one is above the law. This trial is just one of 6 cases, 4 criminal and 2 civil, that Trump is currently facing. He'll be sentenced on July the 11th and could face a prison sentence, although legal experts say a fine is the more likely outcome.
Ukraine welcomed 75 people home from Russia in the war's latest prisoner swap. The freed prisoners of war included 70 men and 5 women, most of whom were privates, though 6 were officers, according to the Coordination Headquarters for the Treatment of Prisoners of War. They were welcomed home by senior Ukrainian officials. At least 1/3 of the rescued soldiers were injured, seriously ill, or disabled.
Не віриться, що ми вдома, що нарешті нас обміняли. Це не передати словами.
Russia's defense ministry said Ukraine handed over 75 people in exchange as part of the deal brokered by the United Arab Emirates. This was the first exchange of prisoners of war between Russia and Ukraine in nearly 4 months.
Germany says Ukraine can use weapons it delivers against attacks from positions over the Russian border. The NATO Secretary General has repeatedly called for easing restrictions on Kyiv as Moscow intensifies its attacks around Ukraine's eastern city of Kharkiv.
This is a war of aggression. Russia has attacked another country, violated international law, invaded Ukraine, and Ukraine has the right for self-defense, and that includes also the right to strike legitimate military targets inside Russia.
U.S. President Joe Biden also gave the green light to Kyiv to strike Russia with American weapons in order to defend Kharkiv. The second largest city of Ukraine is only 20 kilometers from the Russian border. NATO foreign ministers are attending a 2-day informal summit in Prague as the transatlantic military alliance looks for additional ways to help Ukraine. On this occasion, the Czech foreign minister thanked the countries that have joined the Czech initiative for the delivery of ammunition that Ukraine desperately needs.
Good morning, everyone. And it will be literally next month, in a few weeks,
when first physical delivery, the first batches will be delivered to Ukraine, so they could use it to defend themselves from the barbaric Russian invasion.
The next NATO summit will take place in July in Washington.
L'estrema destra sta crescendo in tutta Europa e ha le carte per scombinare gli equilibri politici anche alle prossime elezioni europee. Perché? Chi la vota e con quali possibili conseguenze? Ne parliamo su Euronews Witness.
We need more power to the nation states. We need less competences in Brussels, but we need a common approach when it comes to trade agreements, when it comes to customs, when it comes to the guidelines of foreign policy.
What do you think about this theory of the Great Replacement?
How you name it is your decision. I mean, look at the numbers. The fertility rate of the ethnic Germans is now, I guess, at 1.3. We are dying out.
Slovakia's Prime Minister has been released from hospital 2 weeks after being seriously wounded in a shooting. Fico was airlifted to the country's capital, Bratislava, where he is now receiving nursing care at home. Fico was shot several times at close range while on a visit to Handlova earlier this month. He is reported to have undergone a number of operations after being left in life-threatening condition following the assassination attempt. The attack comes against the backdrop of an increasingly polarized Slovakia, with multiple protests taking place against Fico's political reforms and government policy. The suspect has been charged with attempted murder and remains in custody. He is currently receiving psychiatric treatment, but faces life imprisonment if he is convicted.
Many people with disabilities won't be able to cast their votes in the upcoming EU elections, even if they want to.
I won't be able to vote because I'm under legal guardianship.
Soufiane El Amrani was able to vote in elections, but since 2016, when he was under legal guardianship, he lost his right. He is fighting to get it back, but the legal process is long. For Soufiane, there needs to be a change in the authorities' mentality.
They're afraid that they'll make the wrong choices, and we'll be labeled with we'll be labeled something like, oh, he doesn't know how to vote, he needs help. But it's our right to stand up for our rights and make sure that we're heard and our voices are taken into account.
The situation is not the same across the EU. In 15 member states, intellectually disabled people have full rights. But in 7 EU countries, including Soufiane's own Belgium, intellectually disabled people under guardianship have limited voting rights. In 4 EU countries, Estonia, Bulgaria, Poland and Cyprus, they have no right at all. According to a recent report from the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, in 2019, around 800,000 European citizens with disabilities could not use their right to vote, either because they were banned or because polling stations were not accessible enough. leave. The situation this year is expected to be better.
What you can do is give the right to vote to everyone and then provide support. So they say you provide supported decision making, so people who the person trusts, who can assist the person in voting, and this is how you ensure that they actually participate in the electoral process.
The agency has asked member states to remove the legal and administrative barriers for people with disabilities or increase the accessibility to the election to increase their participation.
French tourists remain stranded in the Pacific territory of New Caledonia with roadblocks and barricades still in place in some areas. Many say they feel abandoned, but the High Commission says everything is being done to respond to emergency situations. New Caledonia has been rocked by violent protests which prompted Paris to declare a state of emergency and send in security personnel. Unrest erupted over planned voting reforms which indigenous groups say will dilute their political influence. More than 10,000 people have marched through the streets of the Spanish island of Majorca in protest against mass tourism. The region is experiencing a dramatic spike in rental costs and locals blame tourists. An average apartment in Majorca costs €1,500 a month, which is unaffordable for most islanders. The regional parliament was expected to discuss the housing crisis on Thursday.